Today I'm going to talk about the Kings of War 2022 Compendium, also known as Big Red Book. So this came out at the tail end of last year, November time. Technically, if you were there on open day, you could get it on the 5th. I think it was out, I think on the 13th, 14th, not sure, I think that's about right. And it's essentially replacing the Kings of War rulebook and pretty much all the Kings of War books up to this point, which is this thing. Now, I'm going to go through what's good and what's bad about it, because there are some good things and to me there are some bad things. First of all, the good, and it contains all the past Kings of War books and erratas essentially. The only thing it doesn't contain is the campaign for the battle in the Halpi. I think it's that, or Halpi Mountain, something like that. It doesn't contain the campaign for that, but apart from that, it pretty much contains everything. That's all the themed armies, the normal armies, the increased magic repertoire, the magic items, the main rules, and so on and so forth. That means it's really good for new players. Having pretty much everything means there's no confusion on what books to buy and what armies you need to play, because basically you've got all the options in there. There's 27 armies that I think really only Games Workshop can come close to having that. I think they've got 19 for 40k and somewhere close for Age of Sigmar, but even so, and even though there's some coverage between some of the armies, some armies get knights of a similar sort of style, some get spearmen of a similar sort of style, and so on, but they are all made different by what unique units and some of the special rules they can get, which is really nice. And also for the price for new players, it's not bad, I don't think. 35 quid for everything you get, and it's 288 pages. Really, only the first 88 pages are rules, and that's including siege rules, ambush, legendary games, and stuff like that. Everything else is army lists. Now, I did say it contains an expanded magic area, and it really does, because you see it has something called the Library of Arcane Knowledge, which is open to all non-legendary spellcasters. Now, if you notice in the Kings of War rulebook, or in any book that contains a spellcaster rule, every spellcaster has a magic level, usually ranging from 1 to 3, although I think there's at least 1 or 2 that's got a 4 on it. What that means is that you can take spells for that spellcaster of level 1, 2 or 3 in this arcane library. Some spells don't have a level 1, some spells don't have a level 2, some spells don't have a level 3, because of how powerful or how weak a level 1 would be, depending on the spell. But it means your spellcaster's got a hell of a lot more options. Some of the spells you might recognise from Dungeon Saga. There's also more scenarios than before. In the original Kings of War rulebook there was 6, now there are 12, each one having a different way to play, not just kill the opponent but also take objectives and get across the enemy line, and so on and so forth. You've got a lot more options on how to play your games and a lot more strategy to go along with it. There's also rules for siege battles. They're in Kings of War 2nd edition, but they're a lot more realised here. There's a lot more effort gone into it, and quite frankly it's a lot more interesting to see how siege battles would work here. There's a big chart where you can see what armies can actually take which upgrades and which siege, attack and defence stuff, because some armies can take stuff and some armies can't. There's also more realised rules for siege equipment, and quite frankly it's the siege rules a lot of war games possibly tried, but I don't think really match. You've also got ambush rules. Now, these are for smaller games, and when I say smaller games, I mean smaller games. These are for up to 1,000 points. There are a lot of limitations, such as you can't have copies of heroes, monsters, titans and war machines, and you can't have hordes or legions, but you can have as many troops and regiments as you like. You can also have a fair few more irregular units by unlocking a lot more troops. This does mean that ogres and big monstrous infantry and large infantry will only be able to have 3 and 5 models between them, but it does give you a lot more flexibility, and it doesn't mean you're taking a hell of a lot of units out there. Chances are you will be only bringing probably 10 units at most, depending on your army and depending on the size of the game you're going for. It does give you a army structure. There's a few differences, like I say. There's also differences in what points of units you can take and so on and so forth. I honestly think this is there to currently replace Vanguard. Vanguard wasn't a bad game, but it was far too complex. This is kind of like small Kings of War and then big Kings of War. Hopefully they'll bring Vanguard back, but for the time being, this does fine. There are also legendary battles, which are large-scale games, and by that I mean 4,000 points plus. Usually in Kings of War, games are between 2,000 and 3,000 points, with 3,000 being on the extreme end. This is kind of for those players that like to have a 6-foot table. In fact, it does mention a 6x4 table in the book. You've also got increased unit stats, such as having more depth to each unit, also increased stats, mainly nerve and attack values. You've also got a legendary battle spell upgrades, which add a lot more madness. You've also got, which is essentially create a titan. This could, I'd imagine, be used for normal games, but this is kind of suggested for legendary battles. A titan costs 75 points as standard, but then you look at the range of upgrades and you've got so many options to make your titan how you want, and it does emphasis put it on a big base. No, bigger than that. No, bigger. Okay, that's big enough. Legendary battles like siege battles I can't see happening that often, but when they do happen I can imagine them being quite fun. And on to the bad. Now, the first thing for me is the price, which I did say for new players is quite good. However, for existing players, it's a bit hit and miss for me. It's 35 quid normally, which again for new players is great, but for existing players that just want the new stuff, such as the expanded magic, the siege rules, the ambush rules, legendary battles, and the erratas for units for your army, it does seem quite expensive. It's about 29 pages for all the new stuff, and yes, there are some rule changes, but really they honestly don't amount to as much as you might think. There's also been some confusion on how cover works because it has been changed somewhat. Honestly, looking through it, it doesn't really feel like it's changed all that much. It's just the wording's a little bit different, and there's a little tiny change that can potentially make a big difference for units in terrain for cover purposes. But realistically, what Mantic have gone about how cover works a long-winded way round, and honestly, that really shouldn't be a thing. Anytime I try and explain something, or when I do a fan-created game thing, I try and not explain things a long-winded way round, and how cover works now is essentially the same. It's just been worded a bit too obtusely, and a lot of players have been confused by it, rightly or wrongly, which if players get confused on and Mantic had to do a video for, Mantic have dropped the ball a little bit there. There are also two groups of players that are going to be a little bit disappointed. One is a bit of an oversight and really it shouldn't have been missed. It's the birthing daughter for the Ratkin. It's been FAQ'd and the stats are online. I don't think anything's changed from when it was introduced in the Uncharted Empires book, but we'll see. Secondly is the Twilightkin. They are not in this book whatsoever. However, Mantic's reason for this is they are being tested and being released at some point. We've seen the artwork for these new versions of the Twilightkin, and quite frankly, they are going to look great. Why they were out of the book is a bit unfortunate, and quite frankly, they could have been put in the book as they are just to keep things going, but I can see from that perspective as well. The last bad thing, and this is more of a personal preference, is that there is no background / lore and very little artwork. Now, there is artwork in the game and it is to a good standard, but to find the actual background and the rest of the artwork, including I think some new artwork and some older artwork, you'll have to scan the QR code found on the inside of the book. This does mean if you haven't got a tablet, a phone with a good enough camera, or a phone with a camera at all, you're a bit stuck, and that's a bit unfortunate. However, I would recommend getting this, if not just for the artwork alone, because as I've said many times before, the artwork is some of the best in wargaming. Quite frankly, I don't believe Mantic are paying the artists for King's War highly enough. Not to say the artists aren't paid enough, I don't know. But quite frankly, they are do amazing work, and I cannot praise them highly enough. So there you go. I suppose the two things you've got to bear in mind is, are you a new player? Do you want to play King's War? If so, get this. It's a hearty recommend. Cannot recommend it enough. If you're an existing player, however, for the second point, it's a little bit harder to sell you on it. Quite frankly, the only reason I could sell this on people is on everything's in one place. Other than that, there's not really much new or much errated stuff for the price, and quite frankly, to pay for errated stuff is insulting at any point. But that's really all there is to it. I only got this mainly for doing this video, just to do for you, and the fact is that I just wanted all the new stuff in it. However, there is one more thing I didn't mention, the Mantic Companion, which is kind of an app and kind of not at the same time. It's odd. You can get the full ambush rules for free on that, so if you just want the ambush rules, you don't need this book. And the majority of the rules are on there for free as well, including unit stats and so on. So you could potentially get away with not needing this book. However, to get the magic, you're either going to have to pay for the app thing or pay for this book. Quite honestly, I like the feel of a proper book, and this is a proper book. Hopefully I've sold you on if you want this book, or persuaded you not to get this book. It's a controversial book in my humble opinion, but it is what it is. So, with that out of the way, goodbye for now.